How's it going, PD team? Today we're going to be building off of the topics we learned in the last video, the anisotropic sliders, and seeing some examples that we can create some brushed metal effects. So we're going to learn how to procedurally create a UV and use that to distort a noise to create brushed metal effects. We're also going to be adding some kind of grip texture that will interact with the anisotropic gradient. So let's take a look and see how it's done. Whoa, hold on a second. There's one thing I want to mention. I encourage you to donate to my channel to help us grow so we can offer more content. You can donate $5 or enter in a custom amount into the field. Every dollar donated goes back into the channel. Go to polygondivision.gumroad.com/coffee. But the link is in the description below. You can click the logo at the top of the page to visit our product page where you can purchase for a very affordable price our tools, presets, custom shaders, and even projects for Cinema 4D. We have loads of great tools coming soon. Subscribe at the top of the page to be notified for updates. With that being said, thank you, and back to the tutorial. Okay, so let's build this texture out. We've got a disk and a plane object, and I want to just see it in different shapes. So I'm going to start off with the disk. I'm going to double click to add a material, add it to my disk, and I'll go ahead and add it to the plane as well. Next up, we'll go to our shader node graph, and I'm going to clean this up here. I'm going to get rid of the inputs just to clean it up. We don't need opacity, we don't need metalness, and we don't need color. And we're going to need the rotation of the reflection. So click the rotation while holding command. And these are the three inputs we're going to be using. So we're going to be later down the road, we're going to be adjusting the roughness using the final output of our materials that we're going to be making. And the main input is going to be this rotation. So where we left off last video is we did a ramp and we loaded it up into the rotation and set this to radial. And you can see we get this radial pattern here. And so what I'll do is I'll check my work. Now I've loaded up an HDR. You can pick one that has a lot of contrast. You'll get the best preview out of that. Also, we need to set the material to be metal so we can see the anisotropic material. And we're going to take our anisotropic value and turn that all the way up. And here's where we left off last time. Pretty cool. So let's see how we can add a couple features to this to make it more interesting, like brushed metal and also the circular grip texture that interacts with this rotation value. So I'm going to rename this and call this base. Move it over here. And what we'll need to start off with is a layer, and we don't need the mask, so I can delete those. And we'll add the base into the base color channel and bring it into the rotation. Let's go ahead and add our first layer. So let's start off with the brushed metal effect. So to do this, we're going to need to create our own custom UV because we're going to take the noise and remap it into a circle. So to do that, we're going to do a ramp, and this is going to be the red. So make sure its RGB is set to 255 and 0 and 0, and I'll call this red. Duplicate it, call this one green, and we'll set this value to green. So check your values, make sure they're 0, 255, and 0. And we need to flip the order because what this is going to do is we want it to do a gradient from red to green. So we'll flip this and invert it. And now we want to add these two together. So we'll click add, and you're going to do the vector add because we're going to be converting this into a vector. So we'll add the first value and the second value. And I like adding the red in the color swatch here to make things easier to see when I'm updating. Makes it much easier. Next, what we want to do is we need to stretch this vector in a fashion that will make the noise kind of stretch. So to do that, we're going to do a multiply node, and we're going to do vector multiply. We're going to plug it into the first input. And what this is going to do is in the inputs here, we're going to be able to stretch this out. So I'm going to do 10,000 by 10,000 in the X and the Y. Leave Z alone. And then what we'll do is we're going to add a noise, max on noise. And what we need to do to get this max on noise to warp is we're going to use these nodes here to warp this noise. And to do that, we're going to use the offset. So go to your input, command click the dot, not the keyframe, but the dot, and we're going to just drag this in. And then we'll add this into here, and we'll set the noise to overlay, and let's check our work. Now you'll notice an issue. We've got brushed metal, but it's going in the wrong direction. And here's how easy this is to fix. All we do is we go in here to our UV here and change this to circular. Now you can see the noise. Just to prove this to you, because it's kind of hard to see, if I solo this, you can see we have noise in a circular fashion. Now, if you want more stretching, you increase that multiply node, or if you want less. So if I want less, I can do like 2000, and you see once it updates, we have less stretching. So this is up to you what you can do. You can also do an input slider that goes into here and gives you one value to enter in. That's just an idea. I like it stretched a lot, so I'm going to put it 10,000. And let's go ahead and add, now that we're done with this, add our rings. So I want to add some grippy. Some of these old receivers, stereo receivers, high fidelity receivers, had these grip rings on the knob, on the end of the knob as like a kind of a design element. And to do that, we're going to make a modulo loop using a gradient, and we'll step it and it'll look really cool. So to do that, we're going to do a ramp, and we want the ramp to be linear, and this is how it's distributed. So we'll then take our multiply node, add this in, and we're going to take the ramp, multiply it by how many loops? Let's do 50, and we'll need a modulo, and that's going to do the actual looping. So I'll plug this in, and we're going to leave the divisor by 1. And then here is our ramp that we're going to add that will be the actual look of the step. So I'll plug it in. And with this one, I'm going to also set the ramp to linear, but I'm going to bring in this value to the middle to give us our step. So you don't want them too close, because then your step will be too harsh. You get a nice gradient in here, and that should be rough is good. So next, if we look at this, our ramp, let's turn it on, and our lines are in the wrong direction. So to fix that, we just go to this ramp here and change that to circular, and that looks good, but you're going to notice something that is problematic. So we want to back this off. So I'm going to bring this back. Let's do 0.25, and you're going to see an issue. So you can see here, we have a seam in our material right here, and that's because we're blending with this step in the way. So to fix that, we can add the loop in the gradient. So if we started off in black, go to white and then black, what it's going to do to the anisotropic reflection is it's going to double up the ramp, and it's going to actually give us more gradient fields, which is really nice. So I'll set this to 50%, and now I'll take and duplicate. So I'll do command or control drag to the end. And now when I go into the viewport here, you can see we got rid of the seam, and now we have two gradients, two major gradient shapes happening. So you can see it right there. Now my steps are a little bit too intense because we're just using this for a light texture, because we're going to finish it up with a bump. So I'll set this to 0.1 to get a minimal effect. And you can see it now no longer looks like a bump. It's just augmenting a little bit, and that's what we want. You could go a little less if you want, or more. Also, my base material is not completely white, so we'll need to make it white to get the full reflection. There we go. So look how beautiful that is. So next up, what I want to do is I have the default roughness set to 0.2. What I want to do is I want to rename this to Anisotropic, duplicate it. We'll call this reflection, and we're going to take the noise as our base, and this here as well. We don't need layer 2. And so we're just taking layer 1, which is our noise, and then we're going to blend the step to get the right amount. I'm going to set it to 0.125, and we're basically just doing another layer, so you're not including the base gradient. And then we'll bring this into the roughness, but I don't want to just drag this directly in. What I want to do is I want to remap it. So I'm going to type in ramp. I'm going to use the scalar ramp this time, which will give us a ramp that we can play with, not a color ramp. And I'm going to right click and say spline presets linear. And remember, our roughness was set to 0.2. So what I want to do is I want to bring the endpoint to just above that. Let's do like 0.4, and let's set our base to 0.125. So we're kind of still averaging out around 0.2. Call this reflection remap. We'll add it into the roughness. I'm going to change the order so it's not messed up. Let's check how we're doing. Looks great. Now let's add the final finishing touch on the textures. I want to add a bump for these ridges. So to do that, super simple. We'll just take this reflection, call this bump. We'll add the noise again as our base. Actually, we'll do it. So what we'll do is we'll call it bump blend, and we're going to take and add it to our first layer, and we're going to set our bump blend value to 50% gray as our base. And then what we can do is if we want less bump on the noise, we just back it off and it'll make it flat because that's 50% gray in the bump. So I'll set it to overlay, which it's set to, put it at 0.5, and then here's where our bridges come in. So I'll add that into layer 2, turn it on, and we need a small value. We'll do like 0.05, and we can leave it on normal, or you can try blending mode, see which one works best for you. And now we'll add it into the bump map, add this in, there we go. And we can bring this down because this is usually way too intense. There we go. And now you can see when we get back, now we have great gradients happening here. Look at how beautiful that looks with the anisotropic material. And you can push and pull the gradient lines if you don't want them. We'll show you without it. Let's rename this. So this is our ridges. This will make it much easier. Ridges, and this one's brushed. So we can turn off the ridges and this one, ridges on this one, and ridges will turn off. And so here it is without the ridges. So this looks great. So if I was to build this out for a client project, I would put a checkbox to basically enable and disable the ridges. So to do that, we'll do a value. I like making my values red, so I know that that's going to change, and I'll call this ridges, change it to Boolean. And then what we can do is we can come in here to layer 2, enable number 2 for that one, grab the link, ridges for this one, and bump. We can do this one together as well. There you go. And now you have a checkbox for your ridges. So if I want them, so they're on, then we can check it, and now they're off. Okay, so we've done the radial gradient. This is how easy it is to turn this into a directional gradient. I'm gonna put it onto the plane object here, and I wanna change this to a directional. So it's super simple. All you're gonna do is I would duplicate this material. If you're doing like a kind of a steel rod or something like that, where the cap needs to be circular and the sides need to be brushed in a specific direction, what you do is you select these and your base goes to vertical, these guys go to vertical, and this goes to vertical. And actually the ridges we can turn off, so I'll leave that unchecked. And that's it. So now you can see that we get this beautiful brushed metal that we can use on a project and just change it out. So if I was doing this for a client, I would put a drop down that linked up, changing this drop down so it does it all three at the same time. So I'll set this to radial, and this one's gets set to circular again. And there we're back to our original circular gradient. And this anisotropic effect can be noodled to your heart's content. You can take this as far as you want. I hope this gives you some ideas what you can do with the anisotropic sliders. You can do so much and layer up all these materials and noises and texture to really create a compelling material. I hope you found this useful. Thanks so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more content. Thanks for your support.